Joining us right now on the phones, State Representative Tony Dell, Republican out of Cedar Park. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us on the show to talk about some legislation that you have filed down in Austin. Before we get to that, though, we just want to get your opinion overall on how the session is going so far down in Austin.
Well, I think it's going fine. We're kind of in, calendar-wise, we're in the middle of session, but we're really just at the beginning of the real heavy lifting because the committee work is happening and legislators like myself are very busy testifying in front of committees, laying out various bills, and the hours are getting longer, and we're starting to vote on more and more legislation. So this is the time of session where we really, really get cranky.
How do you compare this session to previous sessions? How would you compare it? Because they're all different.
Well, they're all different. This is my third session, so I still consider myself a relatively new member of the legislature. But I think it's the same. You start out kind of slow doing ceremonial things because the Constitution says we can't hear a bill in committee in the first 60 days unless the governor declares it an emergency item. And then this middle portion starts to ramp up. And then near the end, it's just all work all the time, 6 days a week and late hours. So we're it's very similar.
How does when you read the news, you see all the headlines, the back and forth between the lieutenant governor, a little bit between the speaker, and how that kind of plays out in the media. How does that affect you guys? The state reps and the work that y'all do. How does that kind of influence what y'all do, or does it?
Well, I think I've heard some reporters at the Capitol refer to themselves as fight promoters, so it's not always as bad as what people might see. Our system is designed to set up, in a sense, conflicts between the House and the Senate, between the legislature and the governor, and that's sort of the beauty of the system, to ensure that there's this robust debate that occurs so that you can have some solution in the end that is acceptable to all parties. A good example is the budget. The Senate has their version of the budget, the House has their version, but by law, no matter what, at the end of the day, we're going to have a bill that both the Senate and the House agree to and can live with that we're going to send to the governor. And so whatever differences we have today are really immaterial because at the end of the day, we're all going to vote on the same thing and send it to the governor for his signature.
Visiting with State Representative Tony Dell, and I like to have on lawmakers to talk about pieces of legislation that don't always grab the headlines. We all know what pieces of legislation have grabbed headlines lately, whether it be the bathroom bill, sanctuary cities, whatever it may be, school vouchers or school choice. You have a piece of legislation, HB 2924, that deals with a problem that you see as a growing issue, not only here in Texas, but probably throughout the U.S., but being a state rep, you're focusing here on Texas. Tell folks about your piece of legislation.
So we've got this problem with predators going online and going after children, but they also go after adults, and one of the things they do is they try and convince, oftentimes the adult will pretend to be another child, and they'll try and entice the victim to send them an inappropriate photo of themselves or do something on video that person will then record. And what happens in these cases, 80% of the time on the very day that they obtain that picture or that video, they start to extort the child. Say, if you don't give me money or if you don't provide sexual favors to me, then I'm going to post this picture where your family can see it, where your friends can see it, and they start to put pressure on the child. Now, last session, we had a bill that many people referred to as a revenge porn bill. It says you can't take an intimate photo of someone and post it online without their permission. That's illegal. But believe it or not, the extortion and blackmail statutes that exist in Texas do not make it illegal that once you obtain this information for you to threaten someone to publish it. It's that act of threatening someone that prosecutors have a very difficult time sort of bending existing law to allow for a prosecution. So our bill makes it clear that is an illegal act. It would be a state jail felony, and we try and bring the law into the modern era and say, look, things exist now that didn't used to exist, like email, the internet, social media, text messages, all these various electronic means which these criminals are using to go after people.
Where's the piece of what's the status on the legislation right now, and do you have any co-sponsors, and who are you talking to about this?
Yeah, we filed the bill right at the beginning of session. It's been referred to the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. I've had meetings with the chairman, who's Representative Joe Moody from El Paso. He likes the bill. He's agreed to do a hearing on it, and my joint sponsor on the bill right now is Giovanni Capriglione, who's from South Lake, Texas, up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Cindy Burkett, who's also from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Last session, Giovanni passed the revenge porn bill. I passed a bill last session about online solicitation of a minor, which also previously had been legal for a brief period of time, where adults could knowingly solicit children online for inappropriate purposes. Kind of amazing.
Right.
And you had these gaps in the law. But because he worked on that bill and I had mine, we kind of see this as a combination of the two and trying to close up any last gaps that might be out there for these bad guys to go after our kids.
So where does the gap fall in here? Because you have the revenge porn bill, and you have other legislation. I would assume about extortion being illegal. So where's the gap here? What happened where there's a gap in this? I mean, it just seems like this would already be illegal.
I know. That's so when the Attorney General's office came to me and asked me to carry the bill, that's what I said. I'm like, how can this not be illegal?
Right.
But Texas actually does not have an overarching statute about extortion or blackmail. We do have it for certain offenses, and it's illegal to extort people in certain circumstances, but it's all under the theft section of the code. And in this case, someone, even though it was done maybe in a deceitful way, they provided the material voluntarily. But it doesn't always happen voluntarily, because sometimes it does occur through hacking, where someone isn't even voluntarily giving this kind of intimate material, but their computer is hacked and they're extorted. You might have a better chance on a prosecution on that one, but it's this voluntary providing of the photos that is a problem. The Center for Missing and Exploited Children tracks this, and they say this has been a growing crime nationwide. They've had a 150% increase in reports since 2014, and the Attorney General's office says they receive complaints about this every day from the Center for Missing and Exploited Children about this happening to kids here in Texas. So it's a very real problem, and one that is very, very difficult to prosecute because the law doesn't give the tools available to the prosecutors.
Would your bill cover only minors, or is this everyone who would be covered?
No, the good news, it covers everybody, but we know disproportionately this crime is impacting kids.
Right.
79% of the reports that the center receives are for female victims, anywhere between the age of 12 and 17, with the average age of the victim being about 15 years old. So for those of you that are out there that are parents or grandparents, I would say, look, you really need to talk to your kids about this issue. And, we all like to think our kids are smart and wouldn't do anything like this, but kids their brains aren't fully developed, and they don't think the same way. And if they do get into trouble at the beginning, they don't know how to get out of the trouble. So you can go to the website for the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and if you just Google the term sextortion, that's what they refer to it as, you'll find all kinds of information on how does it occur and what do the bad guys do to entice victims, whether they be adults or children, but specifically children on that website, and gives you tips on how to talk to your kids so that you can keep them out of trouble.
Visiting with State Representative Tony Dale. Before I let you go, how difficult is it for lawmakers when you meet every couple of years, and technology is always changing? What popular app is out today, it's going to be different in 2 years. Technology is always changing. There's different ways of people are now streaming more than they're texting each other. How difficult is it for law to keep up with the ever changing technology? How difficult is it for you guys?
Well, I mean, I think good examples of how challenging it can be are things like the debate over Uber and Lyft. No one contemplated that you could have this sort of technology available that would allow those sort of services to be provided, or things like Airbnb and short-term rentals.
Right.
So those are controversies we're having at the state and local level that are all related to technology. So, we're a little bit behind the times on some of that stuff, but I think that's a pretty common problem.
Yeah, you're always going to be behind it. Yeah.
You're always going to be behind, and the free market is a pretty incredible thing as it relates to some of those sort of services that are out there, and there's no way government can anticipate all of that.
Yeah. Well, State Representative Tony Dell, keep us updated on how this bill is progressing, and we'll visit with you later during the session, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. That's State Representative Tony Dell talking about his bill, HB 2924. Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO.